who is the program manager for the Workforce Literacy Pilot Program and largely been the central driving force behind the implementation of this program. Today's information session will cover basically all of the contracting aspects of the program. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed and really give you an overview of the session that we're going to have today. So we'll talk at a high level of the Literacy Pilot Program, covering its objectives and intentions. We'll then proceed to eligibility for the applicants and the training population. We'll talk about training because there's some specific requirements for this program as part of that. And then we'll talk about some of the other aspects, including the reimbursement, how it's structured, the contract formats, and how contract administration will be utilized or conducted during this program. Lastly, we'll have the application process, reiterate some of the key points of the application itself, really how to really make sure your program is focused toward the goals of the program, and include some important timeline information for you. And then lastly, we'll wrap up with a question and answer period. So without any additional information, we'll go ahead and proceed. Prefatory note for this, what we are actually talking about is the Workforce Literacy Pilot Program, the guidelines for which were approved at the panel meeting on October 28, 2022. The contents of this presentation, any communication with E2P are not actually binding upon the state and shall in no way alter any specification term or availability of funding related to these programs. Okay, so this is just sort of the legal disclaimer. So I'm going to start really just talking at a high level about the difference between our core program and what ETP does almost day in and day out, and then this specialty fund. So we're going to start really with some background. The Employment Training Panel is a state agency, and we use a pay-per-performance contract structure to reimburse costs for employer customized training. We are a department within the Labor and Workforce Development Agency. You will see LWDA. You will see the word agency. Those are meant to be interchangeable. We are a department of the Labor and Workforce Development Agency, a sister department to the Employment Development Department and the California State Workforce Development Board, along with the Division of Apprenticeship Standards. So we work in a combined effort to support workforce services and support the operations of the other departments within the Labor and Workforce Development Agency. In terms of our core program, we do actually provide funding for literacy skills training in a standard contract format. The goals and objectives of that programs are typically to help workers with ETP eligible employers upskill their English skills needs. So there's a somewhat of an alignment. This program funds will have some unique features to it. And so we're only talking about core program funds in this slide, after which we will be talking primarily about the Workforce Literacy Pilot Program guidelines and its implementation. So this will be the last time we mention core program funds and discuss it. If you'd like more information, we have a couple resources. We have a list of our active multiple employer contractor partners. These are entities that have contracts. There's a website link right there, and you can get a list, and it's broken up by region, but it includes information like the type of training provided, as well as contact information for active contractors. We do provide application assistance, including an interactive orientation. You can get a link there. That'll get you started. There's a list of them. They're about every 2 weeks. It's just a high level overview of the key concepts for ETP funding in the core program. And it's led by Renee Pierce, who does a fantastic job sort of providing the intents and the guidance of the program. If you'd like more information about the core program funding, please, the email address to the Employment Development or the ETP Economic Development Unit, which is ETP EDU unit at etp.ca.gov, is right there. Just go ahead and send an email with your information, and we can discuss general core programs, potential overlaps, or help you get started in core program funding. I'm going to hand this off, but before we start, I just want to make sure and impress upon you. From now on, we are talking about the Workforce Literacy Pilot Program. I'll go ahead and hand it off to Ilya Lonitz, who will introduce it.
Thank you, Robert. And for those who do not know me, as Robert stated, my name is Ilya Launitz, and I'm leading the Workforce Literacy Pilot Program. So this first slide here, as it's titled, is an overview and background. Normally with the employment training panel funds, we get annual funds through the employment training tax, which is through the unemployment insurance tax. Occasionally, though, we are allocated general fund dollars for special programs such as this one. So for this fiscal year, we were allocated $10 million in one-time general fund. And that was with the purpose of launching this workforce literacy pilot program. Many of the program rules and guidelines will be similar to our standard programs. However, everything laid out within the guideline kind of offers a bit of an exception to make sure that the intent of the program is successfully accomplished. So like a normal program or contract with ETP, the Workforce Literacy Pilot Program will also be 2 years in length. And the last 90-day period will be used for retention. So that means all of the training will occur in the first 21 days. And then these funds will be available to expend and encumber for that 2-year period all the way through June 30th, 2025. And the purpose of these general fund dollars is we have a regulation laid out. It's 4451D in our code, which kind of gives the authority of ETP to do these alternate funded programs. Next slide, please, Robert. All right, and so more on the overview here. So because California is home to millions of immigrants, refugees, and English language learners, many of them who face barriers, this program was set up to help out with those individuals with mostly and primarily English literacy skills. We've expanded that to more than just English literacy skills, where it can be digital literacy, math literacy, workforce preparation activities, and even some technical skills, ideally where those are complemented, the English and the technical skills are kind of complemented with each other within the work. And the goal is to address all these barriers to assist these training population so that they can better perform in their job and potentially have upward mobility. Next slide, please. So again, going a little bit more on that point, the intended outcome is to expand or create workforce literacy training programs in those various specific skills. And so for this program, it's solely focused on English, math, digital skills, workforce preparation activities, and technical skills. So a lot of our standard programs, they may offer a whole host of other types of training that can be done. For this program, it's only going to be those training types. And employer industry sectors really can be anywhere. There are some that we just kind of focused and highlighted on that we learned have a high population of the target population we're going for. So those include all the ones listed here, such as retail, agriculture, hospitality, manufacturing, janitorial, etc. So, but there is not really a limit to which type of industry can apply. And research has shown that greater English literacy skills are closely correlated with higher earnings, and the workplace literacy programs that help workers build these skills can play a powerful role in economic advancement, and that's kind of the goal of this program that we're going for. All right, next slide. Thank you. So when an application is submitted for this program, ETP will assess these applications for the quality of the training program to make sure that what is laid out within the program guidelines is being met for each of the applications. And so what that's going to look like, we'll go into it a little bit more in the next slide. and it may vary depending upon how many applications that we get, as well as what is the demand. But we are going to be opening the application window for this program on Monday, February 27th of this year. The applications will open at 8 a.m. and then it'll be a 3-week application window. So you'll have 3 weeks to get into the system. You'll have to register through our online Cal eForce system. And then once registered, you'll be able to open up an application. And then you'll have 3 weeks to complete that application. And then we will close that window on Monday, March 20th at 3 p.m. If we get a situation where the demand for this program is greater than the allocated funding, then we may prioritize applicants who are first time to ETP, or have, if they're not first time and they have fewer existing contracts than others, we may give priority to that. But again, it all depends upon the demand that we do receive once we start getting those applications in. Next slide, please, Rob. Okay, thank you. So again, going back to the priorities, when you are submitting the application, please make sure that you're providing a detailed description of your training program, including benefits to the trainees. What is your industry sector? What are the priorities? Does it offer any upward mobility, or like, how is it helping the trainees? How is it helping your business? How is it helping California, et cetera? And then we may give priority to programs. And again, this is going to depend upon how much demand we get versus the available funding. So if we get an excess of a demand, then we will start to look at applications, not only for the quality, but also prioritizing certain features. And so priority may be given to programs that include complementing the literacy and technical skills, such as contextualized instruction. And that's referring to the use of occupationally specific materials for instruction. So if you're training in a certain type of occupation, then you're tailoring your English and your training program to match that occupation. Next slide, please. All right, more on the application priorities. So we may also give priority to programs where certifications are earned. So when a trainee goes through your program, if they're earning some kind of certification that can be beneficial, especially if it's like an industry recognized certification, then that's something that we may give priority upon it when assessing these applications. We may also give priority to programs that rely on more instructor-led training. And that includes for digital skills, English skills, and that's with or without self-paced training as a complement. So for any program, you are allowed to do what we call computer-based training, which is where the individual goes through training on their own. There's no instructor, there's no assistance. It's just an online software where they're going through, answering, going through the slides, answering the questions, and then they complete it all on their own, and that is allowed. However, we definitely want to see more programs where it's primarily relying on instructor-led, and whether that be, in the classroom environment or something where it's maybe a hybrid model, then those are something we're going to be looking for more. But again, like I said, it doesn't mean you cannot offer computer-based training. That's definitely allowed, but we will want to see at least more of the instructor-led. We're not looking for programs that are primarily computer-based. That it's more of a supplement that we're looking for. And then the last thing here is, and this is true with any employment training panel program, where when a trainee is doing through the program, they're not allowed to be charged for any portion of the training. So if they want to be reimbursed for this program, or sorry, if you want to be reimbursed for their training through this program, then you're not allowed to charge trainees for books, materials, the training time, any of that nature. Next slide, please. All right. So with ETP, the contract format, this program is just the same as our normal programs. So if you're familiar with ETP, then you'll kind of already have the grasp of that. If you're new to ETP, then the way that it works is we are not actually a grant. Sometimes people get it confused. So it's not a grant program. You know, there may be some similarities, but it's not the same as a grant. We are a performance-based program that gets into a 2-year contract. And that 2-year contract is a legally binding agreement between ETP and the applicant, who becomes then the contractor. And the contract term is going to be for 2 years, 24 months. As I stated previously, all training must be delivered within the first 21 months of that contract. It can be completed prior to 21 months. So if you just knock out all the training, that's totally fine. But after 21 months, any training after that will not be reimbursable. And the reason for that is based upon our retention. We do have to allow that last 90 days for you to prove that you retain those employees in their positions after the completion of training. And these programs for the Workforce Literacy Pilot Program, each application, the projects will be capped at $600,000. So you can ask for less than that, but not greater than that, up to that amount. And one other thing to note here is that the training must occur within the contract term dates. So we don't do retroactive training. So if you've already started some training, but you haven't got the contract yet, that's great that you're doing the training, but it won't be reimbursable by ETP. So for any training that you want reimbursable from ETP, you'll submit your application, you'll go through our process, it'll get approved at a panel, assuming everything goes well. And then once it does get approved, then at that point, you will be sent a contract, and then you'll sign that contract, and it'll be for 2 years, and all training can start at the initiation of that date. So one other thing to note for this particular program is, we won't know this initially because, again, we're not going to know exactly what our demand is until we start getting applications in. But we just laid out something within our guidelines where if all the funding for this program is not awarded by the end of this fiscal year, which is June 30th, 2023, or if at any point funds get recuperated, and we'll go over that more in later slides, but if ETP ends up pulling back any of the funding, and then if those two things occur, or one or both of those things occur, and then there are some contractors who have begun their training and started their training, and they can demonstrate that they have completed at least 75% of their training and potential earnings, then we may allow those contractors to go before panel to request additional amounts to their contract. And that's even if they are at the cap. The reason for this is we want to make sure that we're getting out the full funding that we have allocated to us, and hopefully everyone who goes through is able to earn the full amount that they are awarded. That's the ideal situation, but sometimes someone might take a bigger chunk than they can really bite into. And so if that occurs and some of that gets pulled back, or if we're not expecting the demand to be low, but if it does get low and there is some remaining funding, then we will have this option to make sure that we can get all the funding out. So it's just something to be aware of. It may not occur, but if it does, we'll definitely communicate about it at that time. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. So one other item to mention in this last part of this section is with concurrent contracts. So ETP has rules regarding concurrent contracts with our normal program and concurrent enrollment. For this particular program, you are allowed to have a standard or a core funded program through ETP. And even one of our other alternate funded programs. We have a few others that were from last fiscal year that some may be in contract with. You are able to, even if you have one or both of those, you can also apply for this workforce literacy pilot program. So there's no restriction on that. And then the other part on that is with the concurrent enrollment. So that's where you're enrolling trainees in, like, the same trainee in 2 different programs with an ETP. So typically that's often not allowed. However, because of the nature of this program and is being focused more on literacy, we're allowing that concurrent enrollment so long as the trainee is not in the same, what is it here? Sorry. The ETP core program funded project, the concurrent training hours or topics between the 2 programs would not be allowed. So as long as the trainee is not in the same training classes in both programs and at the same time. So the whole purpose of this is you can't have 2 contracts with ETP, and you can't say that you have trainee A and he's in the same class and you're getting funding from both. That is not allowed. So if he's doing, trainee A, he or she is in, say, English 101, just as an example, and doing that one English 101 class, you cannot get reimbursed in 2 programs for that one class. It would just be one program that you'd be getting reimbursed. The other program, you would not be able to be reimbursed for that. All right. And then you can go ahead to the next slide. And for this next section, eligibility for applicants, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Robert.
Thank you, Ilya. All right, so now we are going to be discussing the eligibility of program applicants. So with some overlap to the core program, we have ETP essentially has 2 basic models for contract structures. The first contract model is for single employers. This is where an ETP eligible employer contracts directly with ETP to train their own new and existing employers in employer customized training. So this is most often what we do in terms of the volume of overall contracts in a given year. The second contract format is where we work with an organization that actually aggregates the training needs of multiple employers into a single contract. They use this contract to train and place job seekers. So this is what we call new hire training. And then to upskill new and existing workers, these are called job creation retrainees and retrainees themselves. The incumbent worker piece is primarily what multiple employer contractors do and come to us for. The unique aspect of the multiple employer contractor is that they can actually do the training of people that are unemployed at the start of training. So both entities will need to actually qualify as contractors in Part A. And then Part B will look at their project that they're proposing to bring to ETP. So it's important to note that these applicants can apply for both core funding and alternative funding in the same fiscal year. That's something that Ilya just went over. If you have any questions about doing that, please definitely reach out to either the program page, the email address for the program, which we'll provide a little later, or you can contact the Economic Development Unit. We can provide some support for you and help you understand which format or funding source might be the best for you. In any event, for those requesting multiple sources of funding or 2 contracts in the same fiscal year, all contract performance in the ETP core program will be used to evaluate in any subsequent award. So when you apply for workforce literacy pilot program funds, we will be considering your overall contract performance in other programs. Okay. The basic employer eligibility. So this is when an employer is going to hold a contract in a single employer contract format. Employers can be private for profit and subject to the unemployment insurance tax. This is consistent with our core program. And they can also be nonprofit or municipal employers and not subject to the UI tax. So this is sort of an extension of that eligibility, but it kind of opens up into basically meaning that any employer can apply for this funds. It's to really aim the eligibility towards those employers that maybe have not traditionally applied for ETP fund or sought it based on either eligibility limitations or the structure of them as an employer. All employers must report the wages for their employees using the EDD tax accounting system. So reporting unemployment insurance, they may not be subject to taxes, but they should be using it to report their wages. And then secondly, employers must be located in California and can only train California workers. So this is an important distinction, particularly for larger companies, which may have either transitory workforces or be working with employers from outside of California. This program is exclusively focused on California employees. There is a targeting generally of the industry sectors. We see a strong alignment with a few of these. So employers can be in retail or agriculture, hospitality, certainly manufacturing. They can be focused in on janitorial, the shipping, logistics industry sector. We've seen interest in childcare and healthcare occupations, warehousing, food production, and other relevant industries. The focus really is on maximizing the exposure of potential literacy skills training into the industry sectors where it's probably most needed. These are not exclusive industry sectors. However, it does demonstrate a strong concentration of intended worker occupations with a historical alignment that we see in the objectives of the Workforce Literacy Pilot Program. Again, so this is not being used for eligibility purposes, primarily just as where we see the focus and where we've been guided in terms of our outreach and the unique aspects of these funds relative to other funds available for workforce development at this time. Now, within the MEC contract, so again, remember, multiple employer contract, you'll hear me reference to that, we will reference to it as well. It's multiple employer contractors. So the basic eligibility for MEC contractors are that they must be one of these entities. In our core program, we use a group of employers, and these are membership associations, including a chamber of commerce or a trade association. We also have economic development corporations and joint apprenticeship training committees. Those are our primary entities that work with us to as a group of employers. Again, an organization that's distinct on its own that aggregates the training needs of multiple employers. We're also working under this program with organized labor, including the collective bargaining agreements, the unions, and any sort of identified pre-apprenticeship program. Now, pre-apprenticeship eligibility is exclusive here, so we're not training formal apprenticeship trainees, nor are we training journey workers. Where in our core program, we traditionally include that with their own program, administered by the program projects unit. In this case, we're really focused in on DS aligned pre-apprenticeship if they are going to be applying for this program. We also contract with public and private training agencies. This is primarily community colleges, but may include adult schools, so K-12. This may include particular charter high schools, or even in some cases, depending on the structure, unified school districts or county offices of education if they directly administrate the contracts for a specific school. Third party or private training providers must be accredited by the Bureau for Private Post-Secondary and have a 2-year history of providing training and placement services to the public. Training will be limited to those topics that are covered by their accreditation with the Bureau for Private Post-Secondary. And lastly, we can really use the community colleges, particularly the contract education side of the college, as well as universities, including four-year universities, their foundations. So if, a university foundation tied to either community college or four-year university would be eligible, covered under the auspices of WASC, the Western Association for Schools and Colleges. Lastly, we have the workforce development boards, so a local or a regional workforce development board. Also grant administrators under the WIOA program. So this is Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act. Those entities receive funds directly from the state board. So the California Workforce Development Board using discretionary funds or specific grant funds can award them to an entity, usually within a workforce development board or a program that sort of operates under the auspices of one. Those entities can also apply to hold the workforce literacy fund. So you will be asked about the scope and eligibility of your funds, but it is a viable means. Lastly, we have the nonprofit community-based organizations. This is a new area for us relative to our program. I'm going to go ahead and move over to that page. But if you have any questions about this eligibility, please go ahead and submit questions and we can step you through it and what information might be needed to help you qualify if you've not applied before. Community-based organizations. So under our definitions that we are operating under, really essentially means that it's a 501c3 organization with a demonstrated effectiveness and history representing a community or significant segments of a community, and that provides educational related services to individuals in that community. So as part of this application, a CBO will be asked to demonstrate its 501c3 status and then provide a description of their community educational related services. So as best I can tell you, we're looking for really strong alignment with the intended workforce population of immigrants, refugees, and English speaking learners. So those are really, really important aspects. And of course, the 501c3 status. Excuse me. All right. A note here for the pre-apprenticeship related programs or any occupations covered by a collective bargaining agreement that are going to be included as part of the project. We will be asking for an intent letter as well as a union support letters. For the current contractors with ETP, this is a fairly standard practice. For those of you that have not, we have templated letters that are to be signed by the collective bargaining agreement or the representing the union support for the participation in the program. They will be asked if you can submit them with your application. I think that there'll be contingencies given the short time frame and the fact that we will have some needed. We'll provide some additional guidance regarding the time frame for when you can submit those letters. We may be permissible in accepting them within the development time frame. Ilya, is that correct?
Sorry, say that one more time, Robert.
Is the time frame for the submission of union letters going to be within the application, or do you want it ahead at the application only?
So they will be asked for when submitting the application. If there is some reason that it's not feasible to get it within that time frame, we're not going to deny an application, but it will need to be received prior to going before panel.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify that. It was a sort of just a note that I had. All right. So again, the templates will be available with the application itself. Now, relative to employers that are providing retraining, there are some additional contract requirements that occur in our standard program that carry over into this program. As part of your development of your training plan, you're going to have the employers identify the need for training as you build it out in your application. You'll also identify that the funding that we're providing is supplemental and not replacing or supplanting the company's own funds for training. So we ask for what their training budget is and sort of source and look for the fact that this is not going to be replacing those funds. Also, that the company has a low turnover rate. The regulation we use points to a concept called secure jobs. We're training them for placement into employment that is secure in nature. So the company that they're working for has a relatively low turnover rate, that the investment is therefore maximized on the part of ETP. Lastly, we'll be providing an in-kind contribution. Now, what an in-kind contribution is that an employer is partnering with the ETP program to participate in it. Their investment is a total amount of wages paid during training. So trainees are required to be paid while they're being trained. Additional training areas that are not funded by ETP. So let's say there's either advanced topic areas or additional training similarly structured, but that is not being supported by ETP, you may include that. Also course materials equipment depreciation and facility rental. We simply ask you to estimate these, and then we'll provide a total amount of the investment on behalf of the employer. And for large employers of over 100 in California, over 250 worldwide, large employers are required to provide 100% match. And again, this is really just an estimate, but 100% match. And then for small businesses, it's 50% of what they anticipate to benefit from through ETP training. In all cases, this does not mean that an employer is required to provide cash on hand to participate in the program itself. Should be clear. If you have any questions regarding what an in-kind contribution is, please go ahead and submit a question via email or on the chat Q&A. Turnover rate, this is the secure jobs component. This is for retraining again. Any employer participating with ETP must have a turnover rate focused on its permanent full-time employees of not less than, or not to exceed 20%, for the preceding calendar year at the facility that training is being requested. So if it's at one location, we're calculating the turnover rate for that location. If it's 3 of 5 locations, you're calculating the turnover rate at those 3 locations rather than all 5. Simply, the turnover rate is you're calculating the number of full-time employees who separated from their jobs by the average number of full-time employees that have been employed. Now, a key aspect of this is that you're only including in the turnover rate the involuntary quits, layoffs that exceed 30 days, and any discharge for costs or without cause. So if you're firing somebody, you would exclude voluntary quits, temporary layoffs, your consulting population or independent contractors, also your temporary workers, if you have them on site, those are also excluded from the turnover rate calculation. If you'd like more assistance or any clarification question, you can definitely submit an email address on that, but you'll just be prompted for your turnover rate calculation. If it's high, we might have a conversation if it needs a little bit more clarification, and sometimes it's just that it's not calculated correctly. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off for the training population to Ilya.
Thank you, Robert. All right, so for the training population, we're going to go over here with these few slides of which eligible trainees are able to participate in this program. So for the first slide here, this program will include individuals who are unemployed, so looking for jobs. This is only for the MEC, or the multiple employer contracts. There will also be eligible trainees who are new or existing full-time workers. We call them retrainees or job creation retrainees. Seasonal workers will also be allowed for this program. We see a lot of those in agriculture, but there are also other industries with seasonal workers. And then DAS recognized pre-apprenticeship program. So not the standard apprentice or journey workers, but just for the pre-apprentice program that is doing literacy specific training. Next slide, please. All right, and so there are 3 specific eligible trainees for this program. The individual has to be either an immigrant, a refugee, or other English language learner. And we defined English language learner within the guideline. It's also laid out here. I'm just going to go ahead and state it. So it is defined as an individual at least 18 years of age at the time of enrollment who has limited ability in speaking, reading, writing, or understanding of the English language, and whose native language is a language other than English, or who lives in a family or community environment where a language other than English is the dominant language. So the goal of this program is focusing on literacy, specifically really English literacy, and then complementing that with some other training types that we talked about earlier. But English language learning is the primary goal, which is why we're looking at this target population. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right. So for employers looking at who they can train, if they have some kind of program that like a temp to perm, so temporary worker to a permanent worker, if they have some program there, they can those trainees can qualify for this program. For unemployment insurance eligibility, so with our normal ETP program, most entities, they need to be tax rated for unemployment insurance. So they need to be paying in the unemployment insurance tax. That eligibility is not required for this program. Excuse the HWAF, that's for our healthcare program. But it's the same for we have a healthcare program as well that is launching at the same time. But for this workforce literacy pilot program, that normal eligibility is waived. We want to open this up to more employers that are focusing on these goals. And then, as stated earlier, a demonstration of union support if necessary or applicable. They must be submitted for trainees represented by a collective bargaining agreement. And contracts may be approved with a 15-day contingency if union support documentation is forthcoming. Next slide, please. So for each trainee, the amount of training that they can do that will be reimbursable for this program. So we actually have a minimum amount of hours. So 8 hours is minimum. So if you have a trainee and they start and they do 4 hours, they're not going to count or be reimbursed. So they do have to complete at least 8 hours of training within the contract term. So that's within the 2-year contract, that's within the first 21 months is when all this training will occur. The maximum amount of training per trainee is 200 hours of training. So you can do up to 200. You can do obviously more than 200. Your program, there may be some programs that do more than 200, but only up to 200 per trainee will be reimbursable for this program. Another thing to note for ETP, this is for this program and others, is that with retention or with this program, the training funds, they're earned. So I'm not super familiar with the grant, but I believe with grants, they kind of, the funds get awarded. You say what you're going to do, you get awarded what you're going to do. Here, you're going to say what you're going to do, and then we're also going to make sure that you earn it by meeting the performance-based standards of ETP. And one of those critical things has to do with retention. So ETP wants to see that people who go through the program are holding on to their jobs. They're not, being let go. And so meeting the retention, we call it post-training or employment retention period. And so it can be done anytime the trainee completes their training. So if a trainee goes through for 3 months, they complete all their training, and then they complete their retention period after that, then that's totally fine. But like I said earlier, within the first 21 months, that's the training period. So they can complete it and training and retention before then, but they can't do any training after that 21 months to allow for that retention period. Additionally, and this is just for this program, the Workforce Literacy Pilot Program, we have reduced our wages. So with our normal programs, we have minimum wage requirements that ETP sets, saying that you have to meet, each trainee has to meet this minimum wage requirement. Based on the training population for this program, we didn't want to create a barrier that would restrict some individuals who may not be earning normal ETP wages, but really might desperately need the English literacy training skills. And so with that in mind, what we're saying is the state minimum wage, or if you have a higher local, like county or whatever it might be, minimum wage that's higher than the state minimum wage, that's going to be ETP's minimum wage requirement for this literacy program. So ultimately we know that every employer has to pay whatever the legally mandated wage is, that minimum wage. And so we're saying, okay, that's all it has to be for this program to ensure that we can train as many people who may need this program. And when you do report your wages on the application, and I think we may talk about this in another slide. We will ask you to report the actual wages. So if it is higher than the minimum wage, report whatever that the actual wage is. But just know that once the trainee completes the training, the minimum wage requirement for ETP is the same as the legally minimum wage requirements within the state or local jurisdiction. One other thing to note here, and I believe this was a question, and this is for all ETP training programs, including this one, is, and it says contractors, but really that should say employer, but employers must pay trainees at their normal wages for all hours in which they participate in ETP funded training. For ETP funded training, one of the things here is that this is job skills training, and even with this literacies training, it's going to be some technical and some job skills, and the whole purpose is to benefit the trainee in their job, but also benefit the employer. But for the purpose of benefiting the trainee, those trainees are going to be paid their normal wages, like they're on the job, receiving job skills training. Next slide, please. All right, so speaking a little bit more about our retention. So again, we say post-training employment retention because the retention period begins once the training is complete for that trainee. And we have a few different training retention options. Our regulation is 4400V. You can find that through our website if you want to delve into that. But it lists all the specific requirements for retention. And so all those are open for this program as well. The primary one that we typically see is 90 days after training. So training completes, and then that employee is retained for 90 days. Obviously, ideally, they stay retained longer than that, but for ETP purposes, we're only looking to make sure that they're employed at least 90 days after that training. There are various caveats to that 90 days. For example, if someone switches jobs within that period, then they can get 90 days at that new job, and it's laid out within the regulations, and we can ask specific questions as that comes up for particular programs once you're going through the development process. And then we have other methods as well. So 500 hours of employment during a period not to exceed 272 calendar days. So that is also allowed. So in that 270-day calendar period, if it should be shown that that trainee, after completed their training, has completed 500 hours of work in that period, that will also work. Because this program will allow for seasonal workers, we do have a retention for seasonal workers as well. And that is to be not less than 500 hours within 12-month period after the end of training. And that's with up to 3 employers in the seasonal industry, because we recognize that sometimes they do switch from employer to employer. Let's see. There's a couple of questions. I'm just going to see if I can answer those now, or we may answer them at the end. So one question has to do with studying at home if offering live online sessions with instructors. So we do allow e-learning or distance learning through this program. So that is allowed. And so it's fine if they're at home studying electronically. And then it says, does it need to take place during the work hours or not? So again, this goes back to the employees or the trainees do need to be paid during this training, but it doesn't technically have to be during normal work hours, so long as they're being paid their wages. And there's one other question. So if someone asks if a trainee is a business owner or self-employed, what does the post-training retention period mean in this case? For those situations, it would be, I mean, it would really probably be the same. I might have to get back to you on that, but I would imagine, if they I'll have to get back to you on that question, actually. So we'll get back to that one. So I'm going to go ahead and continue with the slide here. All right, so for additional retention notes, full-time for this program is considered 35 hours per week. And one thing to note is trainees do not need to be employed full-time during the program or during retention, so long as they become full-time at the end of the retention period. So basically we are allowing for part-time trainees to enroll and do this program, so long as the training program results in full-time employment. So ultimately we do want to see full-time employment eventually, but some of the other programs, they might have to be full-time right off the bat. So as long as they end up in full-time, then they can participate. And the exception there may be just the seasonal workers, because they're what is considered full-time for them may be a bit different. All right, next slide. All right. So for wages here, this is the last slide for this section. The required post-training employment retention minimum wage for this program, as I said earlier, is going to be the California state minimum wage or the local minimum wage if that is higher than the state minimum wage. And again, like I said earlier, when you are identifying applicants or trainees on your application, make sure to put their actual wages paid for each occupation. And sometimes it's a range, because obviously not everyone in the occupation is paid the same, but there might be a minimum and a maximum. So just put whatever the actual wage range is in your application. And if you do get a contract with ETP for this program, you will be required to report the start of training wages at enrollment for all trainees. And again, employers must pay trainees during all hours where they're participating in ETP funded training. All right, next slide. Okay, let's see here. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think what we're going to do is take a quick 5-minute break and pause the recording. And then we will return the Q&A. We'll go ahead and proceed with the training types within the WLPP. Go ahead, Ilya.
All right, thank you, Robert. All right, go ahead and let's go to the first slide of this one. All right, so again, for this program, the Workforce Literacy Pilot Program training types, there are specific training types that are eligible here. One is literacy skills, which can be English literacy, math literacy, or digital literacy, workforce preparation activities, and technical skills. And we'll get into the specifics of each of those, what they mean in further slides. One thing to be aware of with this program is at least 70% of training hours for each trainee must include literacy skills. So if you're doing workforce preparation and technical skills, that's totally fine, but at least 70% must be literacy skills, with a significant portion of the literacy skills dedicated to English literacy. We want these programs to be primarily English literacy, with the rest sort of complementing that. And again, reiterating, no program can charge trainees for any portion of ETP funded training. So this means, you cannot charge for books, for materials, for training time. In order for it to be reimbursable through an ETP program, the training must be free of charge for those trainees. That is part of the contract agreement for our reimbursement model. Next slide, please. All right, thank you. All right, so literacy skills. So what does that mean? So we define literacy as an individual's ability to read, write, and speak English, compute and solve problems at levels of proficiency necessary to function on the job, in the family of the individual, and in society. And for the purpose of this program, literacy skills will include both English literacy. In that initial definition, it has compute and solve problems, which is kind of where the math comes in. But we further define English and digital literacy. So English literacy means instruction designed to help individuals who are English language learners achieve competence in reading, writing, speaking, and comprehension of the English language. And we defined digital literacy as the skills associated with using technology to enable users to find, evaluate, organize, create, and communicate information. So both English literacy, digital literacy, as well as math literacy are all included. And again, going back to the previous slide information where it said that primarily English literacy is what we want to see, but all of these are allowable. Next slide, please. All right, so as far as workforce preparation activities, what we're defining this as includes activities, programs, or services designed to help an individual acquire a combination of basic academic skills, critical thinking skills, and self-management skills. This includes training in competencies such as utilizing resources, using information, working with others, understanding systems, and obtaining skills necessary for successful transition into and completion of post-secondary education or training or employment. Some people might know these kind of as soft skills, and workforce preparation activities is another term for it. We wanted to allow this in this program as it seemed relevant for this program. And it's more of a complementing nature rather than a primary focus. And so we're not going to be looking at programs that this is all you're doing, but if you're adding this on to your main program, then that's kind of what we're looking at, and definitely allowable. Next slide, please. All right, the last of the training types is technical skills. And we are defining that as specialized knowledge and expertise required to perform specific job-related tasks and use specific tools and programs in workplace situations. This training type will group much of the job skills focus found in the core program contracts. So this might be something that is actually relevant to the job. If someone's a manufacturer, then some kind of manufacturing job skill training. If someone's doing janitorial work, then it would be the janitorial specific training, or hospitality. It's specific to kind of their occupation. And one of the things that to note, so this is allowable as kind of, again, not the primary focus, because our normal ETP method focuses primarily on these kind of technical skills. This is more of a complement to the literacy skills. And we will be giving priority, or we may be giving priority, again, depending upon the demand, but to programs where training includes the complementing of both literacy and technical skills together. So this would be an example, contextualized instruction. So where maybe someone is, let's say they're learning about forklifts, and in their training program where they're learning English, they're learning language, they're learning about their job specific forklift job, and so they're learning language that is related to that to help them in that specific job, is kind of what we mean by the contextualized instruction. So it's occupationally specific materials for instruction. So priority will be given to programs that do complement those, the technical and the literacy together. Priority will also be given to programs, and this was stated earlier, where certifications are earned by trainees who complete your training program for this purpose. So if they're completing the program and maybe they get some ESL certification or some other certification, something maybe that's industry recognized or not, that's something that that we may give priority to for this program. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so we have training delivery methods for this program. They're mostly pretty much the same, with one exception for our standard programs for those who are familiar with ETP. but I'll go into each just to make sure for those who are new to ETP that you are understanding what we mean by them. But we have classroom laboratory training, which, and the one below that is kind of really all, the first two bullets are really kind of combined into one. So it could be you're in a classroom setting with a live instructor, or a lab setting with a live instructor. It can also be distance e-learning, where again you have a live instructor, but it's just done remotely. So that's kind of all tied into one. I'm going to skip the next one and then go to computer-based training, and I'll go back to the other one. So computer-based training, again, that's what I said earlier, where someone is just, there is no instructor, there's no assistance. It's just, here's your program, you go through it at your own pace. That is allowable for this program, more as a complement than the primary method. And then going back to the distance education hybrid learning, I'll go into the specific detail of that, but that is also allowable specifically for this program only. And then no training program shall consist of a majority of CBT. So for this program, this again, CBT is computer-based training. That's where you're just, there's no instructor involved and you're just going on in your own pace. That, like we said, it's allowable, but we're not looking for, we want programs that have instructors and live instruction. And so you can definitely incorporate it, but not as a majority. And then also, again, we are giving priority to programs that rely more on instructor-led training, which can include for digital skills, and that's with or without a self-paced training part as a component. Next slide, please. So the next couple slides are just kind of definitions to further clarify what we mean by classroom training, laboratory training. But again, it's formal instruction in a classroom setting, where it could be, training on theory, or a laboratory is like more hands-on, where you're actually maybe practicing doing something. And so those are normally allowed in all of our HEB programs, will also be allowed in this program. Next slide. Again, e-learning or electronic delivery training, that's basically that's also allowable in ETP programs. It's the same concept of classroom training. So it's that same idea where you have a live instructor with a classroom. It's just being done remotely. So this is, again, allowable normally, also allowable in this program. We know it's more relevant today, in the last several years than even previous to that. But yeah, so it's you're teaching a live class instruction electronically, everyone's on Zoom or whatever it might be. But it still is the same format as a classroom training. All right, next slide, please. All right, so for this particular program, this was added into it during our, back in October, when we had a policy committee meeting prior to the panel meeting. And so we added just for the workforce literacy pilot program, this distance education hybrid learning. We have a definition here for it, which I'll go ahead and just read. So it's defined as formal interaction, which uses one or more technologies to deliver instruction to students who are separated from the instructor, and which supports regular and substantive interaction between the students and the instructor. This can be done either synchronously or asynchronously, and it may include utilizing technology to assist with comprehension of the curriculum, such as maybe like an AI technology. This is done, this was brought up, several stakeholders wanted to see this in there, that they utilize this type of training method. So this is where some of the training may be done in a classroom, some of it may not be, but there's always an instructor available. So it's not, this is differentiated between the computer-based training, where that's kind of it's self-paced on your own, no assistance. This distance hybrid is, there's always some active instructor either leading it directly or available for assistance. And so within the definition there, this is allowable. Again, CBT is not a part of this. One thing to note, and this was a change made recently, just to make sure that from a technical standpoint, we could move forward without delaying the implementation, is for this program, again, this is only allowable for this program, and the reimbursement rate will be the same as the standard reimbursement rate for this program, which will be $23 per training hour per trainee. And we will be taking that, actually, just that reimbursement rate to the panel this February to approve. So it's dependent upon getting approval at that program for that rate. All right, next slide, please. All right, again, this is the last method, computer-based training. So as said earlier, this is done through a computer at a pace set by the trainee. Some examples of this, we do some of these even just as state workers, where there might be, you know, a sexual harassment training, or there might be, you know, internet security training, and we go through a module on our own. You know, they say get it done by this time, and you just do it section by section on your own, and you complete it on your own. That is what we are defining computer-based training. There is no instructor, there's no ability to reach out to someone for assistance. It's just you go through that program, start to finish, you're done. And that is allowable, again, not as a majority of this program, but is allowable in the program as a complement. And that rate is going to be at a lower rate than the rest of it. So the rest of the training, including the class lab, is going to be reimbursable, and we'll go into that more later, but it's will be reimbursable at the $23 per training hour rate. The computer-based training that I'm talking about here will be reimbursed at a reduced rate of $9 per training hour per trainee. And as stated, no program shall consist of majority of CBT. Next slide, please. All right, so we do have, with our delivery methods, we do have trainer to trainee ratios. So something to be aware of with pretty much in any of the methods of delivery, the class lab, the e-learning, the distance hybrid, they do have to be at a rate of 1 to 20, so 1 instructor per 20 trainees. If you have new hire trainees, so these are individuals who you know, are newly being employed for ETP's new hire rules, we have a slightly lower rate, so it has to be 1 to 15. For the computer-based training portion, that's not applicable because there is no instructor, so that is not necessary on that item. All right, next slide, please. All right, so for the training providers, the employer may select any combination of internal or external training provider as part of the contract. With ETP contracts, normally we give a lot of flexibility to who you can work with to provide the training. And again, for ETP contracts, ETP does not perform the training. We don't tell you, you know, how your training needs to be, other than, you know, the specific rules that just define what, you know, certain items, but really you're developing your curriculum and you're presenting that to us. And so you have a lot of flexibility with that. However, with this literacy program, we do have a few caveats or a few rules on that. And one of those is when you do get into contract with us, you become a contractor, like stated earlier, and you must certify in the application that all training under this program will be only delivered by qualified instructors. And we define qualified instructor as someone who is competent in the subject matter, holds a bachelor's degree, and has a minimum of 2 years of directly relevant teaching experience. And so we're not, in the application period, we're not going to be asking for proof or evidence of that. You'll just be certifying throughout the application. And when you get into the contract, we do, and this is one thing I think we're going to talk a little bit more about it later, but ETP does perform audits, and they get randomly selected. It's after the whole program is over, just to make sure that everything was done in accordance of the contract and that was laid out. And so this is something that may, it may potentially be brought up if the program were to be audited. You know, that may be an issue at that point, but up front we are not asking for proof. We're just saying that you need to certify that. For a MEC, again, that's a multiple employer contractor. So that's someone who is training employees of other organizations, not their own employees. They can use either employer facilities to train or a center-based facility to accommodate employers. So that could be their own location, the location at one of the employers where they're training, or it could be at a whole other location, such as like a community college or wherever it might be. All right, next slide here, and I'm going to go ahead and hand this one back off to Robert.
All right, so thank you, Ilya. I will be discussing reimbursement and administration. This is the money portion of this. So if you're going to perk up to any portion of that, this is probably going to be a good spot to start. So in terms of the reimbursement, essentially, like all ETP contracts, the cost of the training is actually the cost of the training. Additional costs beyond what ETP reimbursement really are borne by the employers. And then models for new hire training need to ensure that they do not pass the cost of training at any point off to the trainee. In this program as well, retrainees cannot be made to be responsible for portions of costs of the training as well. So we use a fixed fee reimbursement rate. So simply taking the delivery method and the training topic for each area of the curriculum. Again, the curriculum is just a list of topics and the range of hours for trainee broken out by its training delivery method. We establish a rate of $9 an hour for computer-based training, and then $23 for all interactive training delivery methods. That's new hire and retraining, but anything other than the CBT training allowable under the workforce leadership or workforce literacy pilot program. To get an estimate of how much your reimbursement will be or what your program costs are going to be, we are simply going to estimate a weighted average of training hours per trainee, multiply that times the reimbursement rate, and that'll give you a per trainee cost, and then multiply it times the total number of hours of the total number of trainees, and that'll give you a total number of training hours representing the ETP funding. So again, funding is just simply the total track training hours times the reimbursement rate. When you're building your application, you'll project this amount. When you're being paid for training in the contract, we're simply going to look at the total hours of training provided within the terms of the contract. Okay, this is the training that's listed in the contract, delivered and tracked during the contract term dates. Again, we don't pay for training retroactively, and nor do we do it after the training term dates have closed. For multiple employer contractors, again, these are the entities that aggregate the training needs of multiple employers. To help offset some of the costs related to promoting and supporting the program, we allow MECs to receive additional reimbursement, and it's based on a percentage of training hours delivered of 20% for what we call support costs. This includes covering the salaries of instructors, training aides, additional trainers. It covers everything from fringe benefits. It does also include operating expenses, use of equipment or rental, and premises. So it can also cover the recruitment of additional employers to participate in the program or support needed to execute. So we will increase the hourly reimbursement rate in a contract for MECs to include the support costs, and it's 20%, which is higher than our core program, which is 8%. Additionally, if the MEC is working with training unemployed individuals, so the new hire training, they can get an additional 10% support costs for their program. Again, this is added to the hourly rate of reimbursement for earned funds. Contractors are encouraged to use support costs as well to educate the frontline supervisors or managers on the benefits of the training for their staff, so they can better support, enable, and encourage the staff to participate in the training or to complete training. In terms of the administration of an active ETP contract, these are some important concepts. The contractor is responsible for all contract administration, including record keeping, payroll documentation, placement information, so that you follow the trainees through the program. You make sure they're effectively enrolled. You provide a load of training hours while training is taking place, and then at the conclusion, you just make sure that they have completed the terms of the training itself, and including their post-training employment retention period. The contractor is responsible for this. You can use an administrative subcontractor and pay them out of earned funds, but you, as the contractor, are responsible for these funds. In some cases, contractors may elect to use alternate record keeping. This is a learning management system. Now, the Cal E4 system that we utilize has a fairly robust upload and documentation module. You can, if you are working with a learning management system, request to use your program as part of this. You need to get approval for this in development, and you'll be working with the regional office staff that will be specifically matched up with this program, and they'll be able to give you more information and a review of your learning management system. In all cases, we'll work with you to make sure that your procedures and documentation practices are consistent with success within the ETP contract performance requirements. An aspect of this as well, unique to this program, all training hours provided must be reported into the ETP systems within 90 days of the delivery of training. So when you deliver the training within 90 days, you have to make sure and upload those records. And the reason being, I'll outlay out in a minute, but it does help us give a very effective understanding of how much training is taking place and how you're using the funds. We will be conducting an independent evaluation of the program to assess its impact, particularly on the outcomes tied to worker retention, wages, and skills attained, certifications, if you will. The contractors are required to participate in this. That means you will be asked some questions about the delivery of training, the performance of training, relative to your participation in this program. So you're part of your getting approved and administrating the contract is to go ahead and include that you understand you will participate in such a evaluation. We'll talk now about fund recuperation, and this section is more about the management of the contract, other than us saying that we're going to award these funds and then come after you if you're not using them. That's what recuperation means. So this is some clarity regarding how we want to manage the funds for awarded contractors. To maximize the usage of awarded funds, any and all funds not expended in accordance with the Workforce Literacy Pilot Program shall be returned. So if you're not using them, you do not deliver training, or the training doesn't meet the terms of the contract, they will come back to us in administration of the contract. This includes costs and support costs that have been provided as part of the contract. Now, administrative costs are typically included within the core administration rate, or the standard reimbursement rate, but support costs are the added percentages that help you enable to recruit or provide administrative support for the contract itself that are not considered part of the training. So if you get the 20 or 30% support costs, that needs to come back as a function of the number of hours of training delivered. It's not a separate payment, and it's not earned until the training requirements are completed. If you have any questions about that, we'll get into them. We will clarify a couple of the points in the management opportunities. Again, the key here, provide the documentation of the training as it occurs as best you can, and any issues definitely raised to staff monitoring or administrating your contract. Oops. So additionally, you're going to acknowledge that any return funds will be redistributed. So all of the awardees may be available to receive additional funds if they're performing well and a contractor is not, or opts to return funds that will go unused. All right, whoops, actually, pardon me for that. Additionally, in order to assure the timely recuperation of funds, or those funds that are not expended in accordance with the contract terms, you're going to acknowledge that we're going to conduct 2 performance assessments within the standard term dates of the contracts as they are awarded. So we're going to do 2 terms, and they or 2 evaluations. The first one, recuperation period 1, is going to be at the end of 12 months. So after the contract's awarded, at the end of the 12-month period, we're going to conduct a performance assessment of all training provided. We're going to look at the evaluation. We're going to evaluate the expected percentage of performance based on the data that has been entered into the system. So if anything less than 50% of the earned training hours have been identified, we may opt to right-size the contract terming if there is no likelihood of performance achieved. So if you're not doing the training or the placement that you contracted to do, we reach a 12-month period and we see really you haven't really gotten it off the ground, we'll talk with you about it. The option is to pull funds back from that as seen as a non-performing contract. If you have a slow rollout period or there are other considerations that can be made, that will factor in the decision on whether or not to recoup funds from a particular contractor. In period 2, this is more of the real likelihood of performance or non-performance. At the end of 18 months, we are going to conduct a second assessment. And based on that, if you're less than 70% of potential earnings, we are going to likely right-size the contract to allow other contractors that are performing well to utilize the available funds or newly available funds to complete training within that term. So if you're really aggressive and performing very, very well, you might be opt or able to receive additional funds as part of this if they were recouped from this process. Again, 2 periods, 18 and 12 months. For the contractors that are awarded funds, we will go through this information again in detail and specific to their individual contract once approved. The next portion of this is going to be the application process and some key aspects that are in it, as well as the timeframes, and then we'll be headed to wrapping up. Thank you. Ilya?
Yeah, thank you, Robert. And before I get into this, one thing I just wanted to clarify in the recuperation. So our goal is once you submit an application and we assess it and then we move forward and you go ahead and get a contract, our goal is to help ensure that you can earn the full amount of your contract. We want you to do the program and be successful, but we do put that clause in there because sometimes not everyone's successful or there are some issues, and we as ETP want to make sure that all that funding does go out. And so that's just a little more background into why we have those clauses in there. But I'll go ahead now. The next section is the application process and timelines. So one thing, when you are submitting the application, there will be a section that has specific questions to literacy, so that you'll be completing various sections that that you'll need to fill out and complete. But there's one that has very specific literacy questions that in this section make sure that you provide good detail in all these. And so again, this slide will be available, but these are this slide and the next 2 slides are the exact questions that we'll be asking in that particular section of the application. So just something to be aware of. But we are going to ask for you to describe your training program, include any benefits that the training provides to your trainees, pathways for upward mobility, the duration and intensity of the training program, things of that nature. And that should say trainees and not trainers, just as a clarification point. So basically what we want is we just want to learn about your program. Tell us what is your program doing? Who are you training? What's the goal of your program? Just give us that information so that when we are assessing, we have all the information that we need. Next question there will be provide further information if the training program includes the complementing of literacy and technical skills such as contextualized instruction. So if your program has contextualized instruction, tell us about it. Tell us that it has it, tell us how it works, tell us, some specifics and details on that so that we can have that information again when we're kind of looking at your program in that review period. The next one is what efforts will you take to ensure trainees make it through the end of the training program? So this is something key where, something we learned, especially with literacy programs, is sometimes it can be difficult to get people to go through the program. There's a lot of barriers, especially for the intended training population. So we want to see programs that are successful. And so we want to see programs that are taking efforts to ensure that their trainees are actually making it through their program. So anything that you might be doing, please provide us some detail on that. Next slide, please. All right, the next 3 questions here on this slide. So again, like we stated that we need at least 70% of the training must be literacy focused, with a significant portion of that 70% dedicated to English literacy. So describe how your program meets that requirement. Describe, the details of your program related to that particular question, to your literacy, to your English literacy for the program. How are you doing? What type of training methodology, etc. The next one there is describe how much of the training hours will rely on instructor-led training methodologies, and that could include self-paced as a complement or not. But ultimately, we want to know, again, we want to prioritize those that do have more of that instructor-led training methodology. So, please, tell us, what portion of it is going to be instructor-led, what portion might be CBT if you have CBT, what portion might be self-paced, but with instructor component. Just give us the detail of how your what training methodologies you're using, like proportionately within each one as well. Next one there will be describe how the trainees will remain employed after the completion of your training program. So this is kind of to that retention point. We want to know that the trainees, this training is benefiting those trainees to keep their job, to advance to a new job, or whatever it might be. So just give us some information on how that typically works with trainees that go through your program or will be going through your program. Next slide, please. All right, with these last 2 ones in that section of the application, so there's describe how your program will promote the benefits of literacy training to frontline managers, supervisors, to help ensure they support their employees doing the training program. So this one is intended not as a reimbursable training, but more of like, how does your program promote this program to the managers of these trainees? One of the things that we learned is sometimes some of the obstacles are that the frontline managers, oftentimes they don't want to lose their staff to training programs because they want to keep them producing. And so programs that are promoting the benefits of that training, like, hey, if your staff can go through this training program, here's the benefits that they will come back to you. And so that those managers are encouraging their staff, because we did learn in our research that can be definitely an obstacle or a barrier to successful completion of these programs. So if your program is doing that, then that's what we want to see, and let us know how that is being incorporated in there. And for those programs who are going to be contracting as a MEC, that multiple employer contract, the additional support cost, at least a portion of that, is to kind of lay out to any methods that you have for doing this. So if you have advertisements or individual workshops or whatever for the managers, just explain it to us. And then the last item in this section is, will any of the employees participating in this training be working part-time at the start of training? And if so, will the training result in full-time employment it says within 90 days, but within the retention period. So that's the standard one that we typically go, but if it's another retention period, it could be within that period as well. And basically, probably most people will have full-time employees going through this program. But if you do have part-time, just let us know, explain it here. If it's not applicable, you can just put not applicable. But if you do have part-time, explain that and explain how they will be ending up in full-time employment at the end of this training and retention period, because at the end of it, they will need to meet that requirement. All right, next slide. All right, and so those are the questions on that particular section of the application. One thing I do want to note is with our application, there are some sections where we kind of ask some general questions for our standard programs that may not be necessarily applicable to this program. When you are completing your application, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. The first couple days of the application window and the last day, we're going to have kind of open sessions where you can kind of come in, ask a question, and then get back to your application. So we'll be assisting. We also have emails from the Economic Development Unit, as well as a specific workforce literacy email. So a lot of opportunities and options to ask questions while you're going through the program. But if you ever come across a question where you say, I'm not sure if this is relevant or whatever, you can ask us. One example might be where there is a question that will be in the application that you'll come across that asks if you provide safety training. Safety training is not actually part of this. That's really for other programs, but it's in there. So just be aware that there is, especially in the section that will be called special categories, a lot of those may not actually be applicable to this particular program. Just answer them to the best of your knowledge, and any questions you have, feel free to reach out and ask. But then on this slide here, so anyone who is interested in applying for this program, as stated earlier, you will need to go onto our website and register in our Cal eForce system. That is our online system where we do all of our applications through. And so many of you may be registered already, but if you're new to ETP, you will have to register for a Cal eForce system account. Once you are then registered, you'll have an option to complete and submit the application within the application window. So you'll have to select the Workforce Literacy Pilot Program option and then go through the full application to the end to submit. This application window will open this month, at the end of this month, on Monday, February 27th at 8 a.m. And it will close 3 weeks after that on Monday, March 20th at 3 p.m. So make sure that you start your application, fully complete it, and submit it during that window and prior to it closing. And once we get those applications in, we will be looking at applications to assess them to ensure that they meet the guidelines laid out for this program. Any priorities, like if our demand is higher, as mentioned earlier, then we're going to assess for some of those priorities and the quality to really make sure that we're getting the best programs. And again, priority, if demand is high, again, we also may potentially give priority to first-time applicants coming to ETP, or those who may be here but maybe have fewer existing contracts than others. That may be something we do. It may not. It just depends upon demand. All right, next slide, please. All right, this slide here is just a screenshot of our website. This is where you can register for a Cal eForce account or log in if you are already registered. So if you go to our website at etp.ca.gov, you can navigate to this section to register or sign into your Cal eForce account. Next slide, please. All right, so these are the important or significant dates for this program. Obviously, today is the first information session. We are going to conduct another information session a week from today. It'll be in the afternoon from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. next Tuesday, the 21st. We'll be covering the same exact information in this session. You're welcome to attend the second one if you like, but it will be the same information covered, so there's not any need to do that. If there is anyone you know who wants to attend that hasn't attended, then that would be a good opportunity for them to attend. The application window, again, as I stated, is here in bold, so those same times. And again, this information with the application window is already posted to our website, so you can go to our website. We have a specific page for the Workforce Literacy Pilot Program, which has these dates for both the information session and the application window. When the application window is open, not only will we be sending out communications for that, but we will also post that on our website, and we'll have links to apply through there. And there are currently links to apply for the next information session on our website as well. The review and proposal development period will occur once the application window closes. So end of March 20th, through and into May of this year. I believe that date is incorrect. It should be 2023. But that is the period where we will review the applications, and then we will begin to, those that move forward, we will begin to develop them into an ETP panel proposal. So it's kind of all part of ETP's application process, but we take information out and we put it into a format that our panel likes to see, so that they can, make their decision based on that information. And then all of the programs for this program, all of the applications that go forward, we're planning to send them to the last panel meeting of this fiscal year. And our fiscal year, just to clarify, goes from July 1st to June 30th for the state of California. But that last panel meeting will be on June 9th of this year. That will be the panel meeting. I believe that one will be remote, but I'll have to double check. That information is on our website. So anyone will be able to attend via Zoom, and links, communications will go out to there. If you are not signed up on our stakeholder mailing notification, I'd recommend doing so. You can do that through our website, and you'll get all the communications. We will be sending out periodic communications as reminders for some of these dates as well. Once the panel meeting concludes, the panel will go ahead and they'll vote on, whether to approve or not these projects. And then from that point, our contract review unit will send out the contract for you to sign. But you can consider the estimated training start date to be the date after panel, so June 10th. You can set it to a later date than that, but it would not be able to be set to an earlier date than that. So your contract will lay out what that training start date will be, and that's when you can start any ETP reimbursable training, once whatever date that is that your contract states, and then for the 21 months plus 3 months of retention for your 2-year contract. Just a note that all dates after the final proposal submission deadline are approximate and may be adjusted as conditions dictate. And so what we mean by that is there is always a chance the panel meeting and the estimated training start date could fluctuate. As of right now, that's what it's set as. But know that could fluctuate. If it does, we will send out plenty of communications, update the website, all of that. But that's just a caveat to be aware of. All right, next slide, please. Okay, this is just kind of reaffirming the application window. And one thing to note is once we close that window, late applications will not be accepted. There will be no exceptions for that, and there will be no appeal process for that as well. So do make sure that you get your applications in within that window. Because we do have a few weeks before that window opens, just a little under 2 weeks here. Any questions that you have after this session, we do have a workforce literacy email box that you can feel free to send any questions that you have there, and we can definitely answer and assist with that. And again, the submission method will be through our Cal eForce system. and which you can access through our website to get registered as stated earlier. And then I'm going to go ahead and hand off the Q&A here to Robert.
All right, thank you, Ilya. So that'll wrap up the essentially structured portion of the pilot program overview. Thank you very, very much for your time. What we'll now do is just proceed to some additional information before ending the reporting. These are the email addresses. So if you have any questions, this is the email address that will go to the Workforce Literacy Pilot Program team. And they will be able to provide responses. So this will be, anything technical in nature. If you have very specific details, want to know whether or not this program fund source or either of the Healthcare Workforce Advancement Fund or the core program would be more appropriate, we can answer specific questions there. Our ETP website has support documents, including the application, contract templates, and sample information. We probably will put up FAQs. We will certainly put the corrected, I apologize for the errors, in the PowerPoint itself today. And that'll all be located there at the website address there. And then our CaliForce hub, which is responsible for all of our application, and you can get the information, including registering, as well as some technical information support for your application itself. So there'll be screens that'll provide clarifications on the elements of the application. You can definitely find it there. Now we'll go ahead and turn off the recording.